All right, friends, let's go ahead and do a case study here. This is being included in the accounting ethics module because ultimately, I guess it was an accounting issue, although there was also personal fraud involved. And this week we're talking about fraudulent enterprises. This is a well-known case. Does anyone bank at Wells Fargo? Anybody? A few of us? Loida, Esther, you two? Oh, your parents. Okay. Maria does. All right. I did as well until recently. I bank at Chase now. Chase is not much better, to be honest. What does Wells Fargo do? Well, they're an enormous conglomerate, one of the big four banks, along with J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America, and Citigroup. Wells Fargo is an international banking and financial services holding company headquartered in San Francisco. The company specializes in personal, small business, and commercial banking. So they do all sorts of different kinds of banking, running the gamut from individual banking for retail customers like ourselves, all the way to corporate clients in Fortune 100 companies. Wells Fargo has kind of a folksy origin. Established in 1852, they got their start in the California Gold Rush, and they've always had a kind of a Western feel about them. Today, they are the world's second largest bank by market capitalization and the third largest by assets. They employ around 265,000 people, with 8,700 branches in 35 countries, and they have accounted for 70 million customers worldwide. In 2015, just before the company's scandal in 2016, they were ranked the 7th most respected company in the world by Forbes. In a lot of their marketing, they highlight their folksy appeal. There's an old stagecoach wagon, which they actually originally did use in moving bank assets from one bank to another. John Stumpf was the CEO when the scandal occurred. He was put in the position of CEO in 2007. Incidentally, this is interesting commentary on the executive pay issue. He was paid 473 times more than the median employee at Wells Fargo, although did forfeit a substantial amount of pay after the surfacing of the scandal. He stepped down from his role as CEO after pressure in October of 2016. What was the scandal? Well, fake accounts was the scandal. Okay. The bank was caught in 2016 opening millions of fake bank and credit card accounts for customers. These ghost accounts were a way for the bank to earn extra fees from unwitting customers as well as to inflate its sales figures. The accounting scandal had been going on for many years. Let me give you guys just a quick illustration of how banking works. This is personal and loan banking, right? So the way banks operate is they take deposits. Those include the deposits in your savings accounts, deposits in your checking accounts, and they run a loan book on the basis of your deposits. So the loan book is actually an effort to lend out the money that is in your savings account or your checking account. And that might be a car loan. It might take the form of a mortgage. Wells Fargo is also in the credit card business. So it could be personal unsecured loans. There are a variety of different kinds of loans that they run out of their loan book on the basis of the deposit money. The deposit money is used as a guarantee for the loan book. All of this is called fractional reserve banking. Fractional reserve is the name given to the reserve that the deposits constitutes. And the loan book can't be a certain percentage larger than the deposits because the deposits are the basis for the fractional reserve, as it were. Okay, if at any point all the deposits were to be removed at once, that would constitute a problem for the bank because it is on the basis of the deposits that they make their loans. Okay, which is why, of course, we have guarantees for personal and checking accounts, savings and checking accounts by the FDIC. Do you guys know what the number there is? How much of your money in your checking account is guaranteed? Does anyone want to take a guess?
50,000?
250. 250, Spencer, yeah. At any rate, though, it is in the interest of banks like Wells Fargo to open as many accounts as possible. Okay, because that makes them more impressive, of course, to investors and to other credit providers. But it also increases the deposit base that they can then use for their loan book, to run their loan book. That's also why they have fines if you don't keep a certain amount of money in your account. I think that if I don't keep a certain amount of money in my Chase account, they fine me $15 a month or something. Okay, so there are all sorts of reasons for banks to want to open accounts, and in this case, things got out of hand. They started opening ghost accounts on behalf of their customers without the customers realizing it. Here's a quotation: Wells Fargo's resulting market dominance has come at a significant price to the general public because it has been achieved in large part through an ambitious and strictly enforced sales quota system. Apparently, the company pushed its bankers into fraudulent practices through quotas and constant monitoring. So, like a lot of companies, they had sales quotas, only their sales quotas were especially aggressive. So aggressive that the company employees felt that they could not meet the threshold expectations for the number of accounts that needed to be opened each day. And so employees began faking the accounts. Reasons for the scandal then included sales goals, pressure from upper management, fear of management retaliation, and neglect of customer rights. The kinds of customers who were especially targeted were older people, people who were thought to be more vulnerable and unable to protect themselves against such tactics. Also, people who didn't check their bank accounts very often. The analytics that are internal to the bank and that they use alert them to how many people and how often are checking their deposit base in their bank accounts. Wells Fargo has said that it has fired 5,300 employees in relation to the scam. It has also agreed to pay $185 million in fines and refund $5 million to customers. The DOJ is involved. The U.S. House Financial Services Committee has become involved. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has also been involved. It's all going to take a long time to unravel. The big question at the heart of the Wells Fargo scandal, of course, is how much management knew. What did management know? And what did they not know? The CEO and others in the C-suite level executive team, John Stumpf and others, have always claimed in testimony before the House, U.S. House, and other places that they didn't know what was going on. I personally don't believe this. I think that what happened was they had sales targets. They knew that their employees couldn't meet these sales targets, and yet they left them in place anyway because they wanted to try to strongly incentivize the employees to succeed. The employees began cheating, and they allowed the cheating to take place through the ghost accounts because they knew that it actually would benefit the company financially if they just let this go on under the table. So while I don't think that they necessarily planned in some master plan the ghost accounts scheme, I think that they allowed it to happen. At any rate, if management's word is right, and if they in fact did not know that this was going on, at the very least that's evidence of negligence in the way they're running their company if they don't realize that the company employees have made 2 million phony accounts on behalf of unwitting customers. Okay, in the wake of the biggest scandal in the bank's 164-year history, distrustful customers are not opening as many checking accounts or applying for credit cards, and branch visits and meetings between customers and bankers are down too. Okay, Wells Fargo's immediate quarterly earnings following the scandal were $5.6 billion, down from $5.8 billion a year earlier. Okay, investors are hoping Wells Fargo will walk away from this crisis intact, but it also appears that the bank's recovery will take a while. Wells Fargo is an enormous conglomerate, and this scandal certainly won't sink the company. However, the company has been dinged by the scandal, and its profits and its size have diminished somewhat as a result. To help recover from the scandal, Wells has announced a series of changes in how it deals with customers. Every customer now gets an email after an account is opened to confirm the person opened it, and electronic signatures are now required on all new checking, savings, and credit card account applications. The bank has also eliminated sales goals for its employees and announced a new mystery shopper program in which people go undercover as customers to make sure employees are doing their jobs right. Okay, and finally, Wells Fargo is taking steps to ensure that employees who call the bank's ethics hotline to report abuses are not retaliated against, which is something that is said to have happened in the past. So it came out of the scandal that Actually, there were people who were interested in and willing to blow the whistle on what was going on, but because of past retaliation, they were all afraid of doing so. And so the scandal got bigger and bigger until it eventually became a very large thing and very damaging to the company. Okay, questions or comments about this case, the Wells Fargo case? Okay, and while Wells Fargo has been singled out for this, I guess I'd have to say that my own opinion, again, is probably that this sort of practice might be more widespread than we'd like to believe in the industry. Maybe some of the other banks are doing it as well, although they might have dialed that back after Wells got caught. A lot of banking customers are pretty vulnerable because they don't check their accounts very often and aren't aware of what's really going on in their name. My wife gets really annoyed at all the security protocols she has to go through whenever she's basically registering for any website now. They always send a text to her cell phone. She says, this is so annoying. But cases like this, I tell her at least, remind us that it's important to have all the security protocols in place for what it's worth. Okay. Go ahead and grab the lights again, please, Maria. Thank you. All right, friends, we're going to turn to a couple of points now in the lecture, talking about fraudulent enterprises. I'll say fraudulent and illegitimate. More on that in a bit. Most of the businesses that we've talked about this semester have been what might be called legitimate enterprises. By that I mean that they sell a product or a service or some sort of a raw resource, and they have customers, and those customers pay them for the product, and the business is being run as a sustainable business model. So a profit is being made, and sometimes when a profit isn't being made, cuts are made in the workforce or in the production processes so that efficiency can again be achieved and profit can again be made. Okay, but there are some businesses that are illegitimate, that don't follow that kind of a model. And I want to talk about two such businesses as part of today's lecture on fraudulent enterprises and the accounting process that goes into that. Okay, one that I want to talk about is pyramid schemes, and the other is Ponzi schemes. We'll do pyramid schemes first. Okay, a pyramid scheme is a riff on what is actually a legitimate business model. Okay, and the legitimate business model is direct hierarchical sales. Okay, so the structure of the legitimate model is like this. The business is structured so that money is made in two ways. It's first of all made through sales of the product to external customers, but it's secondly also made by means of recruitment of other people who then go on to make sales to other customers. Okay, so money in part is made through direct sales in these enterprises to people who are outside of the hierarchy and who constitute customers. So that's the first source of revenue in a hierarchical direct sales model, is just the direct sales themselves. But money is also made in these enterprises through recruitment. Okay, and most of us at some point in our lives have encountered businesses like this. Okay, maybe it takes the form of house-to-house sales. Maybe it takes the form of direct interpersonal contact. Okay, but most of us have probably gotten a sales pitch from somebody who's recruited us into a hierarchical business model like this, and or have purchased products from such businesses. Okay, one example of a company that is a legitimate hierarchical company and is based here in Texas is the cosmetics company Mary Kay. Okay, this is cosmetics for older women. Nobody in our class probably would be purchasing products from Mary Kay, but they have a long established line of cosmetics for, especially sold in house-to-house situations, for older women, and they have a long established line of rewards for employees who, what the heck? Is that the light?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I thought it was an electricity thing going on. It was your hairband thing? Okay. Okay, all right, okay. I saw the light flicker and heard the Velcro and thought that like this was happening, you know? You know what I'm gonna do when the shooter comes, right? So my plan has always been to, like, I've always envisioned myself sort of like heroically charging the shooter while my students escape, right? So my plan has always been to like grab a chair and like run at the shooter with the chair as a shield. But the problem is there's no other way out of our classroom, right? So we'd all be sitting ducks. It wouldn't matter anyway. My wife has rolled her eyes and said, you'd be rolling around on the floor like everybody else. So, okay. All right. Mary Kay is a well-known legitimate enterprise. Okay, and they are legitimate. Here's the rub, right? This is the distinguishing feature that distinguishes a legitimate hierarchical business from a pyramid scheme. Okay, they are legitimate because the amount of product that leaves the hierarchy is greater than 50%. That is, the people who are salespersons in the hierarchy are actually able to sell product. They can move product outside of the hierarchy. Okay, and there are other legitimate enterprises that are structured like this without a doubt. Okay, at the same time, there are illegitimate enterprises, some that have been shut down by the government and others that continue as going concerns, but that really, if we were honest with ourselves, probably only continue to exist because they pay politicians off in the form of lobbying fees to keep themselves from being shut down. Okay, let me just highlight a company that I don't like at all, but that continues as a going concern, even though I consider it an illegitimate enterprise. That company is Herbalife. Has anyone sold for Herbalife, or does anyone have relatives or friends who have sold for Herbalife? Okay. Direct sales for Herbalife or friends? Friends? People that you know? Okay. Often you'll see on the highway, somebody with like an Herbalife sticker on the side of their car, or sometimes you'll see some of their products just around and about in the general culture. Herbalife is in the business of nutritional supplements and like various kinds of like health products. Okay, so vitamin supplements, shakes, things like that. Why are they illegitimate? At least in my opinion, and in the opinion of most people, actually. They're illegitimate because product does not leave the hierarchy in these kinds of numbers. The great majority of product is actually consumed by the lower down people in the hierarchy. This is what makes it a pyramid scheme. It is a pyramid scheme because it is predatory on the people who are cycled into the process as salespersons. If you happen to be one of the people at the top in the Herbalife pyramid, remember a large percentage of the revenue comes from recruitment, and so these people might be getting a 50% take here, okay, and a 25% take here, and a 12.5% take further down at the next level. If you were one of the people at the top getting this take there and this take there and this take there, then you're making off really well. And in fact, at Herbalife, an incredibly high percentage of the money is actually made by the people at the very top. The people at the bottom who are recruited as sales team members and happen to be the latecomers in the process make very little. Does anyone want to take a guess as to what the percentage breakdown is between the top and the bottom? So let's just, let me just list here the top 1% at Herbalife, that is the people in the top 1% of the recruitment hierarchy. What percentage of the company's income do you think they make? Anyone want to take a guess? There's a hint, it's a real high percentage. It's about 99%. The top 1% make about 99% of the money. Okay, and the people lower down end up being unable to move product and unable to actually make money in the way that they were promised that they could do if they participated in this sales enterprise. The product is too expensive, there's not enough demand, they can't move it outside of the pyramid and they end up consuming it themselves. Okay, Herbalife continues to function because they always get new recruits cycling through. These people cycle through and then cycle out because they can't make any money. But Herbalife people at the top hold big hype rallies, other kinds of special sales pitches in order to try to convince other people to come cycling into the organization. Okay, often this model is used also by other different kinds of businesses. The sales hype includes pitches for really unrealistic kinds of financial gain expectations. Okay, a good rule of thumb, if you get a pitch for a company, a direct sales company, and they say retirement at 29, okay, a good rule of thumb is if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. And that's certainly the way Herbalife sales pitches end up looking, is too good to be true. Okay, the reason why Herbalife will collapse one day is because there are not enough people in the world to cycle through perpetually. There is only a finite amount of people in the world, and most of those people who cycle through, in fact, almost all of them, don't go back for a second round. So Herbalife is going to eventually run out of people who they can hoodwink into becoming direct sales participants for this company. Okay, unfortunately, Herbalife is very successful, continues to be very successful at what it does. They're very successful because they have found out how to prey upon vulnerable social networks. Okay, an example of a vulnerable social network might be a church. Another might be a family. Okay, so if you are at the family dinner table at Christmas and Grandma says, I've got a new exciting sales plan for everybody, it's hard to resist when it's a family organization, right? And there are levels of trust and networks of trust that Herbalife preys upon in order to gain people's trust. It works really well by preying upon networks of existing social trust. Okay, the majority of Herbalife's sales participants in this country come from our nation's Latino community. The Latino community has large families. I think that's great, that's wonderful, but this gets preyed upon by a business model like this, and it's kind of unfortunate. Okay, Herbalife is not alone in doing this. There are lots of other illegitimate pyramid schemes, without a doubt. Some of them, in fact, recruit on campus. I know that Primerica recruiters were here just recently. Okay, has anybody ever gotten a sales pitch or been recruited by a pyramid scheme? A direct sales opportunity that seemed too good to be true or was promising lots of money immediately or something like that? What are some examples that we've experienced?
Have you heard of Monet?
Of what?
Monet.
I have not. What do they do?
They sell hair products.
Oh, really?
It's like a big thing.
Is it a big thing right now? Is it another direct sales thing? Some direct sales companies are legitimate.
They say that they aren't a pyramid scheme, but I don't know. It seems like it is.
Yeah. Usually, if you just do a bit of online sleuthing, you can find voices for and against these kinds of organizations, and use your judgment and figure it out. They really prey upon college students, especially college students who aren't sure what they're going to do after school. This is something that's actually often easy prey for companies like this because of the promise of riches by 27 and stuff like that. Most of us will not be wealthy by 27 unless you're Mark Zuckerberg. Okay. Good. Anybody else received a sales pitch or a recruitment pitch? Yes, Maddie.
Wouldn't like Vortex be included in this?
Would what?
Like Vortex, like
Oh, possibly, yeah. I know the name and I know that they've been criticized. What do they do again? Remind me.
it's like sort of like an investment thing. I don't know that much about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's like the hierarchy thing, and they pay something to the top person, and when they invest, I don't know, something like that.
You said Forex?
Yeah.
Forex?
Yeah. So not Forex, not foreign exchange. You said Vortex, right?
Yes.
Yeah. That's the one that I've heard of. Could be, not sure. I'd have to do a little bit of research. Yeah. These kinds of companies are usually pretty slick. The websites look really good. They show you stories of people who've made it, but they don't tell you the statistics about the great majority of people who, in fact, actually lose money through these schemes. Yes.
I have a question. What about this new company that's out there? It's called Vector Marketing. It's called Vector, but it's under
Vector marketing? Huh? I don't know about them. I'm not sure. Does the sales pitch sound like what I'm describing?
Kind of, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Sure.
It sounds like a pyramid scheme.
Yeah, you'd want to do a little bit of checking under the hood, if you're interested in looking into this sort of a thing. Look, guys, use your eyes and ears, and if you start seeing stuff that looks like it's hype or it looks like it's manipulative sales tactics, I mean, it probably is. So it's something to watch out for. And they certainly do prey upon vulnerable college students who aren't sure what they're going to do after college, and so they're looking around for something, and so this is often easy pickings for these kinds of pyramid schemes. Ponzi schemes are related. Okay, the most famous Ponzi schemer of all time was Bernie Madoff. He made off with about $65 billion. Okay, Bernie Madoff is an incredible case. Ponzi schemes, let me give you the structure of how a Ponzi scheme works. It's actually joined at the hip with pyramid schemes in that it punishes latecomers. So it's like pyramid schemes in the sense that if you're not one of the first people involved, you actually take a hit. Okay, but at the same time, it is different in certain structural ways from most pyramid schemes. Okay, at the center of a Ponzi scheme is the Ponzi schemer. Okay, let's say I'm the Ponzi schemer, and I go to Spencer and I say, I'm going to make you a deal. Okay, 5 will get you 10. If you give me 5 gold bars within a year, I will give you strong returns. Okay, and Spencer's like, okay, I'll do that. Okay, right? Okay, so Spencer gives me his gold bars, and Madeline's also involved, right? Okay, and Madeline is the next recipient of my sales pitch. I say, look, 5 will get you 10, and Madeline says, okay, gives me her gold bars, and I need a total dope. Who's the last person? I'm joking. Ben, you want to be my last person? Okay, so Ben's like the worst one-off because he gets the last sales pitch. And what the Ponzi schemer does is the Ponzi schemer takes the gold bars or whatever it is from later people and gives it to the earlier people in order to follow through on the promise of returns. Okay, and the Ponzi scheme keeps working as long as the schemer can continue to find more people. Okay, because what is being done is always Madeline's gold is being given. Madeline's gold is being given to Spencer, and Ben's gold is being given to Madeline, and Maria's gold is being given to Ben, etc. Right? It's the way the Ponzi scheme works. Madoff's Ponzi scheme is really famous because most Ponzi schemes collapse after a short period of time. Eventually, you run out of people who are going to be willing to fund this. But Madoff kept his Ponzi scheme going for 25 years. Okay, it was an extraordinarily long time. And it became an enormous, gigantic fraud. It was exposed during the Great Recession in 2008, because what happens psychologically during a bear market is people want to pull their returns. They pull their money from the money manager, and a bunch of people all wanted to pull their money at once from Madoff's fund, and that's what the Ponzi schemer can't have. Ponzi schemer can't have everyone trying to pull at once, because the Ponzi schemer has to keep finding other people who he can then use to pay off earlier people, as they one by one decide to cash out if and when they decide to do so. Okay, and Madoff ultimately, his Ponzi scheme ultimately resulted in $65 billion in lost money for the customers who were involved. It was an incredible story because some of the people involved were very high-level people in the society. Okay, a lot of Hollywood types lost a lot of money. Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, Kevin Bacon, people like that. Other well-known people in the nation's Jewish community, financial elites, lost a lot of money. Elie Wiesel, the Nobel Prize winner, lost most of his money in the Madoff Ponzi scheme. Still others in sports lost money. The owner of the New York Mets lost a ton of money in the Madoff scheme. Okay, and ultimately Madoff gets convicted. It's a real sad story too, because one of his sons commits suicide, another has brain hemorrhage thing that's going on. He gets convicted. He's still alive. He's in prison. He'll never get out. But what happened was an attempt was made to recover the money that had been lost in the scheme, and ultimately only about $5 billion of the 65 got returned to the rightful owners. The rest had just been spent off, and Madoff had spent a bunch of it. The way the Ponzi schemer makes money from all this is he skims off the top. The Ponzi schemer is living the high life, taking the money from the people who are being schemed. Okay, notice that not everybody loses in a Ponzi scheme. Right? So if you're one of the first people and you cash out, then you don't necessarily lose. You might actually achieve the returns that the schemer promised. But of course, the later people, Ben and so forth, lose it all, because all of their money is being used to fund the earlier people. Okay, now Madoff he made it so far and was so successful for so long because he was the ultimate insider. He was the quintessential insider. Okay, he was actually president of the NASDAQ for 3 years. And so people trusted his credentials. They believed that this guy was actually what he said he was. But ultimately, he was just running a Ponzi scheme where he was shifting money around from bank account to bank account and not actually investing it the way he claimed that he had been, the way he claimed he was doing. Okay, let me ask you guys a question. If you are approached by a money manager and told, here, I can get you good returns, here's my strategy, will you entrust your money to me? How can you tell when it's a legitimate money manager and when it's a Ponzi schemer? How would you be able to identify a Ponzi schemer? Based on the characteristics that I've just described, can you think of any identifying features that you could point to?
They promise unrealistic returns.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, that's a great identifying feature, is the unrealistic returns promised. Again, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Madoff was really successful for so long because he didn't promise totally unrealistic returns. He promised returns of about 14% a year. Okay, and if you know your history of the stock market, you know that the S&P 500 returns about 9 to 10% a year and has done so for a century or more. Okay, but that 9 to 10% a year is actually not every year. That's an average. Some years that 9 to 10% might be 21%. Some years it might be minus 3%. Okay, and so forth, right? It's inconsistent. It's up and down, up and down. Madoff promised returns that were market beating, 14% to 10%. So that was market beating, and that was part of the reason why people wanted to invest with him, because he appeared to be providing multiple years of market beating returns in his money manager history. Okay, but what the Ponzi schemer cannot do is have inconsistent results. Okay, so Ben's right, unrealistic promises is one of the hallmarks of a scheme. The second is overly consistent returns. Overly consistent returns. Okay, and it's the Ponzi schemer can't risk overly consistent returns for this reason. People psychologically, when the market is having a down year, they tend to pull their money. That's just the way people are. And the Ponzi schemer can't risk people pulling their money. So what the Ponzi schemer does is he's got to provide incredibly consistent returns so as to convince people to keep their money with him. Okay, so Madoff couldn't risk a minus 3% year, for example. Since this is the reality, namely ups and downs, if the money manager is returning much more consistent results that are just sort of like steady 14%, 12%, 16% every year, then that looks suspicious. And that's what Madoff ultimately was doing, was trying to provide suspiciously consistent returns. Okay, so unrealistic promises and overly consistent returns are the two tests that you can use to identify an illegitimate money manager and separate such a character from a legitimate money manager. Questions or comments about Ponzi schemes? All right, folks, I've got about 2 minutes left in class. There is going to be a substantial amount of material from Wednesday's class that will be on Friday's test, and I'll try to get the video up right after Wednesday's class, because Wednesday we are going over Sarbanes-Oxley. Okay, please all do watch the video from Wednesday's class. I want to say a couple things. I'm just going to say, talk a couple things about Sarbanes-Oxley right now here at the end of this class. Although I'm not going to start the PowerPoint, which I'm going to do on Wednesday. Okay, but Sarbanes-Oxley is an enormous piece of federal legislation, and it was passed in response to the Enron accounting scandal. And it was the largest piece of federal legislation really ever in the financial industry. And it's brought about the end of the privatization era, or the era where accountants regulated themselves, because it established certain federal guidelines and expectations for what accounting firms had to follow and had to do in order to continue as auditors of public companies, and also as legitimate accounting firms. Earlier in class, I mentioned the fundamental problem in accounting, which is that management pays the accountants in order to obtain financing. Okay, and a lot of what Sarbanes-Oxley is doing, and when I talk about it on Wednesday and you see the video and I go through the PowerPoint, a lot of what Sarbanes-Oxley is doing is it is trying to separate these two parties as much as possible from each other so that management doesn't get overly chummy with accountants. Okay, so when Sarbanes-Oxley lists laws about how you have to rotate the auditing firm, you can't have worked, if you're a member of the auditing team, you can't have worked at the company that you're auditing for a certain number of years, et cetera, et cetera. These are all efforts to separate management from the accountants in a way that will provide the accountants with a bit more independence and ideally a bit more prudential judgment in their ability to make assessments about the financials of the company. Okay, so that's just a quick preview of what will be going on Wednesday.